my goofy hick dance in Oh Brother Where Art Thou makes me laugh every time I see it, because there was a choreographer there who'd come up and said, I'd like to talk to you about a dance. And I was like, I kind of have my own dance I want to do. And he's like, no, no. And I go, oh yeah. And when I did it, I just remember hearing the Coen brothers, they laugh too loudly off camera all the time, you know, and just hearing them both going, laughing will always be a great sense of joy for me. Out of sight. I remember reading the screenplay. I'd done Batman and Robin, and I knew that I needed to find a better script to work on for the next film. So I waited about a year, and this movie came around, and there was a director attached to it, and the studio came to me to play the part. And when they came to me, the director quit because he said I wasn't a movie star, which fair enough, he's probably right. And so we had to go look for a director. And so we had a meeting with Danny DeVito, who was the producer then, with Stacey Sher and Michael Schamberg. And we went through a list of directors, and Steven Soderbergh's name came up. And he was having a rather unsuccessful run. He had just done a movie called The Underneath. And it was a moment in time where both Steven and I needed a success. Quite honestly, we needed a hit. Out of Sight never was a hit, actually. It was critically well-liked, but it wasn't a hit. And so it was a really good time for both of us to come together and meet. And, you know, I got to play this really fun character who just really loves Robin Banks. She's got one flaw, man.
You see the man talking to your bank manager has his case open?
Oh, that's Mr. Gwendon, one of our assistant managers. Our manager is Mr. Schoen, but he's not in today.
But you see the man with the briefcase?
Yes?
That's my partner. He has a gun in there. And if you don't do exactly what I tell you, or if you give me any kind of a problem at all, I'm going to look over at my partner, and he's going to shoot your Mr. Gwendon between the eyes.
You know, but he also falls in love with a cop, which is usually a problem.
I buy you a drink?
Yeah, I'd love one.
Every actress in town read for that part. And part of it was that she had to be sexy, but you also had to believe that she could shoot you and kill you. And Jennifer had all of that. You know, you believed every minute when she picked up a gun, she might pull the trigger and blow your head off. And she was really good. She was wonderful in the film. And it's funny because, you know, she's had an amazing career and gone on to do so many things and sort of be an all-around entertainer. But I think if you look back, that's a performance that really stands out for her.
And that extra pillow you want, I'm going to get that for you, but that's going to be like 5 C's.
5? Hey. Sign says shut the fuck up, or can't you fellas read?
What the f you talking to, man? You got a problem over there, Foley?
That's the first time I got to work with Don Cheadle. And we've done, I don't know, 7 or 8 things together since then and are very close friends. Don makes every film better. That's the truth.
What's going on here?
Nothing, you know, just reading this fundamentalist shit. We just got all excited and everything.
And there were so many wonderful performances by so many wonderful actors in it. It's a movie that really holds up. Scott Frank wrote the screenplay, and in general, you couldn't go wrong with it because there were such great other supporting roles with wonderful actors in them. But they were such great parts that you kind of wanted to go off and see what White Boy Bob's life was like, or you wanted to go off and see what Dennis Farina's life was like. You know, every character had such a lively, interesting world. Isaiah Washington with his crazy hair, and you know, and each of the characters. I mean, you know, Viola Davis has a small part, and I've done I don't know how many projects with her as well. Tiny part in it, but she just knocks it out of the park. They're just such really flushed out, great characters, which you don't get to see all that often. Elmore Leonard movies in general weren't very good. No fault of anybody's. The screenplays, they would try, when you adapt a movie from a book, you try to adapt the plot, which is what you try to do, and then you try to weave in your characters. Elmore Leonard movies, it's a Diamond Heist, 52 Pickup, whatever the movies are. The characters are the secret. And Scott Frank first adapted Get Shorty. That was the first Elmore Leonard film that really worked, and it worked really well. And that's because Scott understood just focus on the characters. The heist isn't that interesting. And this one was a diamond heist, and it's not that interesting a heist. You know, the diamonds are in the fish tank, big deal, you know. But what was spectacular were all of the characters in it. You know, Ving Rhames' character originally was called Red, and he was a big red-headed white guy. And I remember Soderbergh and I were talking, we were like, all the bad guys are black and all the good guys are white. And we thought Ving should play my best friend. And he and I had been working on ER together. And so that made it fun. You know, honestly, it was just a really wonderful time. And you're right, it was fun to be in Miami at that point. It's a good time to be there. Oh, brother, where art thou? I was on the set of Three Kings in Arizona. I sat down with them. They had the script. You know, that was the year that they had Fargo out, you know. And they'd never done a bad film. And they said, we have a movie, would you like to be in it? And I said, yeah. And Joel goes, yeah, do you want to read it? And I go, yeah, I'll read it, but yes, I'm going to do it. And then I took the script back to the hotel room. We were in Arizona. And I read it, and I couldn't believe my luck. I couldn't believe that I was going to play this guy, Everett.
Join you two ignorant fools in a ridiculous superstition, thank you anyway, and I like the smell of my hair treatment. The pleasing odor's half the point. Baptism. You two are just dumber than a bag of hammers. Well, I guess you just might cross the bear.
Pull over, Everett.
These are kind of big breaks in your life, to work with directors who you just adore and to be able to do a part that's really fun and funny. And they said, you know, we want him to be a hick. And I was like, well, I'm from Kentucky. And they said, okay, well, can you hick it up a little bit? And I was like, sure. And my Uncle Jack, who was living in Harrodsburg, Kentucky at the time, I sent him a tape recorder. And I said, read all my lines out of the script into this tape recorder. And I get the tape back, and I listen, I turn it on, and it goes, Georgia, I don't think folks around here talk quite like this here, but we'll give her a go. And I was like, got exactly what I wanted.
How you doing, son? Name's Everett. These two soggy sons of bitches are Pete and Delmer. Keep your fingers away from Pete's mouth. He ain't had nothing to eat for 13 years except prison food, gopher, and a little greasy horse.
The Coen brothers, the way they write, they don't change a word, they don't edit anything. You know, when you get the script you get is the script you shoot all the way through. It's very rare it's like that. And so I learned every line like Shakespeare, because you can't really improvise in the middle of a Coen brothers run. They write such specific things. And so I'm doing all the scenes, and every time I came to a scene, you know, it'd be like, you know, Delmer, where the heck darn are you? You know, where is you? Where in the heck are you? And stuff. And Joel came up to me and he said, why is it that you say every line exactly like we wrote it, except you never say hell and you never say damn? I was like, you're kidding. And he goes, no. And because I'd thrown the script away and I was just listening to the tape. And what I realized, my Uncle Jack, who's a Baptist, when he said, I don't think folks talk like this, he meant about cussing. So he completely took out all the cuss words and said heck and darn, you know. And so I was doing, well, heck, what the darn? So my Uncle Jack rewrote the Coen brothers. He's the only one to ever do it. It's my Uncle Jack.
I am the man of constant sorrow. I've seen trouble. Oh, damn! This is Soccer Bottom Boy!
Well, no one would have ever picked that it would have won Album of the Year over U2. No one would have ever picked that Tim got paid more than any of us because he was singing on the album. You know, that opening sequence with the guys with the pickaxe was an actual old, I think, wire recording that T-Bone Burnett found of an actual chain gang singing. And when you can't find the writer of a song, then it goes to the singer. The royalties go to the singer. So they found the guy, one of the guys who was singing, who had been on a chain gang in like the 60s or 70s. And they knocked on his door and were like, here's a check for $700,000 for a song you sang while you were on a chain gang in 1970, you know. Pretty great story. No idea that the album would take off like that. And, you know, we all loved the music, but we never thought that would be the case. I mean, it was the #1 soundtrack for almost 2 years. I mean, it's just crazy, you know, how popular the soundtrack was. The Ocean's Trilogy. There's a fun thing about that gang is there was literally no ego involved in it. And there's a funny thing you see, and you can see it in those the way that the scenes play. There was no actor in those scenes trying to steal scenes. They're all kind of actively trying to hand it to the other guy. No, you got the funny bit, or you do this, and so there was such generosity of spirit and throwing things away in such a way that it's so easygoing and so fun. I remember Julia, I didn't know her, I'd never met her, and she was making $20 million a film, and we just talked Brad into doing it and Matt into doing it. And we wanted Julia to do it, so I put a $20 bill on a script and I sent it to her and I said, I hear you get 20 a picture now.
You're a thief and a liar.
I only lied about being a thief. I don't do that anymore.
Steal.
Lie.
I'm with someone now who doesn't have to make that kind of distinction.
No, he's very clear on both.
You know what your problem is?
I only have one.
You've met too many people like you. I'm with Terry now.
Does he make you laugh?
He doesn't make me cry.
She was spectacular to work with and is a dear friend. And those guys, you know, I've done a lot of movies with Brad and Matt over the years because of that. But that was my first meeting of them. And the very first day we got together, it felt like, you know, it just felt easy and fun. And we were all we were living in Las Vegas. And, you know, I'm the cooler. No one lets me near the gambling table. Ever. I mean, literally, if you've got 20 showing, the dealer will pull a 21. I'm just that guy. If I'm sitting there, Matt would always go, just get out, get away, go away. He'd stand up and yell.
We need a high-paying job.
Well, now we're too hot to work anywhere in this country.
So we go abroad. How about we go
We're on to 5 o'clock.
Good. Where are we going?
Amsterdam.
Amsterdam it is. Clock's running, guys. Let's go.
All right, never been to
Then we went to Europe and did 12, and we shot some of it in Lake Como, which was my hometown. And Brad sent out a memo to all the people in the town, my town. I'd lived there for years. But he had it posted on like telephone poles. It said, you know, the movie is coming to town, and please only address George Clooney as Mr. Clooney, or in his character name of Danny Ocean, and don't look him right in the eyes. So the papers was like, El Divo, George Clooney is El Divo. It was a horrible story, which I later got him back for. 13, we were back in LA and shooting with Al Pacino, which was a blast. He came in and just immediately got into the swing of it, like, let's have some fun.
One reason not to bounce your ass out of my place.
You know the reasons. You already decided before you walked over here.
They were all booked here. You took them. What'd you do, bribe them?
The only person who had a hard time was Soderbergh, who had to put it all together, but wrangle the cats, you know. There's some things that are just laughable. We would get in laughing fits on the dumbest things. Like, you know, because I'd always have to do the setup. Like, I had all the dialogue where I'd have to go, okay, here's what we're going to do. You're going to do this, you're going to do that. And we'd have those, like, all-night shoots where it's like, you know, 12 hours. And I remember I'd gotten through it on their coverage. I said, let's do everybody else's coverage first. It's like 10 pages of dialogue. Let's get through shoot them first, so I'll really have it down, so when you turn around on me, great. So I would nail it. And then camera turn around on me, and I start, and I go, and then you're gonna go into the chamber, and then up the chute. And then Don just goes, or is it up the chamber and into the chute? And everybody went, oh, and I went, oh, and then from that moment on, I couldn't get one line right. I mean, it was all literally, we did it in like one line at a time. I was completely shot to hell. And Don's like, I'm sorry, man. We would do hysterical, like, idiotic things. Like, there was a house when we were all staying at my house in Lake Como, and there was a house across the lake. It was empty, and we'd made up a story. There was an Italian book about it, and we'd made up a story about how haunted it was. And my buddy Giovanni, who's Italian, he's pretending to read this story where this guy would kill people and, you know, throw them into the lake, and talked everybody into, like, how, you know, dangerous this house was. So 3 a.m, we get a ladder and we put it on this pontoon boat, and Matt and Don and Brad and I took the boat across the water, took the ladder up and climbed in the house. The first thing we saw was like a statue of a snake eating a woman's head or something. You were like, oh. So we came down to the conclusion was we'd give $10,000 to any guy that could spend the night in the haunted house with just a candle and a bottle. You got a candle, you got 6 matches and a bottle of wine. And we left, I guess we left Cheadle and Pitt there. And Matt and I came out, we're sitting in the boat in the middle of the lake, and we have to see the candle go by every window. And it goes by like 2 or 3 windows, and then we get a call, and they're like, fuck that, get us out of this house. We came back and pulled them out. So there's a lot of idiocy that went on, you know, along the way. But we had a really wonderful time. And they're, you know, they're all still very dear friends, so. Good night and good luck. I'd been very vocal about my opposition to the Iraq War in 2003. And people like Bill O'Reilly was doing shows on why my career was over because I was unpatriotic American. And they were organizing boycotts of films I was in and things like that. And so I wrote Good Night and Good Luck as in protest, and the idea of how, you know, I felt like the Fourth Estate, the news organizations had dropped the ball in asking the tough questions. And what happens if the other 3 estates fail, how important it is that the Fourth Estate stands up. And I look back and I remembered the Murrow and McCarthy story. I remember the Army McCarthy hearings. And so I started writing about that. So we raised, you know, like $6 million, which is pretty low budget for that. And we shot it in 24 days on one soundstage. And from the moment we started that, everybody got it. You know, we would give all these, the guys who played Murrow's boys a copy of a newspaper. We'd say, okay, here's this is, you know, November 5th, 1954, New York Post. And they would sit at the typewriter. They'd all get their different newspapers. And they'd sit at a typewriter and they'd pull stories from it. And then we'd have 2 cameras hidden inside the screening room. And I was playing Fred Friendly, who was the producer. And I would go, okay, what's your lead? And each of them, because they'd all pulled all of the pages, they owned the story. And they would go, well, Nixon got kicked out of going to Duke University because, you know, and they boom, 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 boom. And it really gave it this live cinema verite feeling. And I knew all along that I wanted to use Diane Reeves singing as a chorus, like a Greek chorus to it that just was constantly had this beat going through it that was our soundtrack. And with other than that, no score.
Get the shot. He wants to do the story. Joe?
Remember Delbert Clark? No longer with us.
New York Times?
Yeah, our friend at the Times, yeah. This is yesterday morning. They're saying it's...
How old is he?
53, illness, sudden illness, home of a friend.
No, it's not an obit piece. Natalie, send some flowers over there from the CBS.
Absolutely. A couple things. Case before the Supreme Court involving the constitutionality of a section of the Internal Security Act provides for the deportation of any alien if he becomes a communist after entering this country.
I screened for Mike Nichols, and he loved it. And then I never screened it for anyone else. And we went to the Venice Film Festival. And at the end, we got this, you know, 5 or 6 or 7 minute standing ovation. And we didn't know at the time whether anyone would get it. You know, we had no idea. We thought it was just a little protest film.
Because if they are right, and this instrument is good for nothing but to entertain, amuse, and insulate, then the tube is flickering now, and we will soon see that the whole struggle is lost. This instrument can teach. It can illuminate, and yes, it can even inspire. But it can do so only to the extent that humans are determined to use it towards those ends. Otherwise, it is merely wires and lights in a box. Good night, and good luck.
I have a lot of journalism teachers from colleges who use that film as a teaching tool, which I'm very proud of. It's important to watch that film now and hear what Murrow talks about. Just the idea of saying we will not be driven into an age of unreason. We are not, you know, born of fearful men and men who feared to write or speak against things that were for the moment unpopular. It's important to remember that those words, every bit of it still plays. You know, unfortunately, it was the beginning of a commentary in news. How important that was, and it's important to remember how important that was. It did help bring down McCarthy and the craziness of what McCarthyism was, and it was crazy. There's revisionist history now. People like to change the rules, but it was crazy. Hold up a blank piece of paper and say, I got a list of names. and it was ruining people's lives. But it also opens the door for the, Sean Hannity's of the world. It also opens the door for commentary by much less responsible people, Tucker Carlson's of the world, who can just spew anything and say. So as important as it was, you always wish they were Walter Cronkite or Edward R. Murrow and hope that they're not Laura Ingraham and Bill O'Reilly. When you open that box, that's what you get sometimes. Michael Clayton. We were shooting in New York, and it's kind of winter and nasty. Everything about it felt a little heavier while we were there. But I have to say, if you know Tom or if you know Tilda, Tilda is the funniest of them all because she always plays sort of these cold, bitchy, uptight, characters. And she's got the greatest laugh. She's one of the funniest, most engaging, fun human beings I've ever met in my life. Truly, and enjoys life, attacks life in a way that is so fun. And she was spectacular in it.
$10 million, your account, the moment this meeting is
Karen,
started.
everyone's waiting.
I'm coming, Don. You have a deal.
You're so f***ed.
What?
You're f***ed.
What do you mean?
Take a wild guess.
Is there a problem?
I don't understand.
Here, let me get a picture while I'm at it.
You don't want the money?
No, you keep the money. You're going to need it.
I get to win in that one, and usually he doesn't. That's the thing about, if you look at my career, I've played an awful lot of crooks or people who've done some sort of, crooked things in life. This guy is a crook who is his own worst enemy and doesn't win those arguments. I go in and talk with the lawyers, and they're like, look, here, just take this payment and shut up. And every single argument I get into, I lose, And so at the end, with Tilda, I got the goods on her. And she's finally caught in the way that we hope we get to catch these, the corporate malfeasance that we were talking about before, the way we want to catch them. So for us, it's that great relief of we caught the big company doing the shitty thing. It's not that it's going to cost them money. It's not that they're going to get fined. They're going to go to jail. And that's what you want. You want to see these people handcuffed and walked out. And it's a really good movie because it gives you all of the, it has a payoff at the end.
All right, here we go. That guy right there, stop him. Grab that guy. What are you doing? With detectives with the NYPD. All right,
I'll tell you what, an interesting thing people don't know. It was based on an investigation on the Ford Pinto, and if you hit it from behind, it would blow up, this car that was made. And the idea was that Ford eventually had to recall it. But there was a scandal about it, which was that there was an internal document from Ford at the time that said, look, it's going to cost us $1 billion to recall all these Ford Pintos. 11 people a year die from getting hit from behind. Class action suits would cost us $200 million. Our thought is it's cheaper to absorb the 11 deaths and the $200 million class action suit than to recall all the cars. That piece of paper got into the hands of a judge, and he said, okay, now you're all dead. And everybody was fired, and huge class action suit. He couldn't do that story necessarily. Tony didn't want to do that story. But he based Michael Clayton on that. So it was always based on the idea of this corporate malfeasance. The idea that that everything and all the machinery, the lawyers and all of these pieces that have to come into play to make these things work, to make them get away with these kind of things. So it was based on real deep, important subject matters, but it was still it was a fiction, as a work of fiction, so that you could play with the story a little bit more and without worrying about lawsuits and that kind of thing. We talked for a while about how we wanted to end the film, knowing that the end of the film really was me walking away. But we had to end it, and it needed to land. We sort of came up with the end of The Graduate and how when they get in the back of the bus at the end of The Graduate, they just sit there for a long time. And first it's they live happily ever after, and then you just sit with them for a while, and it's like, what have we done? And holy shit. And so Tony goes, okay, well, let's just put you in the back of the car and we'll just leave the camera on you. Again, if that was a shot you did at the beginning of the movie, it would be the most boring shot in the history of film. But it's a shot where everyone watching it sort of relives their version of the movie through me, through what I'm thinking. So they're playing it through, and it's their version of it that goes through. But we didn't have the permits to shoot in New York City in the middle of the afternoon. So we're just stealing the location. So we get in the car, and the car's covered with lights all around it, and a camera, 2 cameras mounted there, I think. And we're going in middle of high traffic through like Fifth Avenue, right? Just in the middle of New York. And so everyone was like, God, what were you thinking when you were going through that? What was going through your mind? You know, what was, you know, how are you, you know, because we learned so much about the character from the. All I was trying to do was not laugh, because every time, like, we'd stop at a light, people pull up, like, they'd see, you know, they're looking in because there's all these lights on the camera. They go, that's George Clooney. Hey, George Clooney, what are you doing, man? Hey. And I'm just looking straight ahead, you know, looking like right towards the camera. And all I'm trying to do is not crack up for like 3.5 minutes. Because everywhere you go, hey, George, look at George, look at me, yeah, you know. And it still makes me laugh to this day, because when I watch the film, all I can see is me trying not to laugh, and everybody else sees something completely different, you know. The Descendants. Descendants was interesting because it was the first film I'd ever played where I was really the wuss. You know, my wife was cheating on me. You know, I like there's a scene where I run in flip-flops that I specifically tried to run like a dork. And it was one where, you know, I'm not athletic, I'm not in control. Even if I'm not in control, I don't get to tell anybody really off. My 7-year-old daughter is smarter than I am, and, you know, has better sense than I do. So I'd never played a character that was that lost before, and that betrayed before.
Your mother wanted it this way. She has this will, see, that says that we have to do it this way. We both do.
Of all the actors, and there were some really wonderful actors there to work with, but Shailene, you know, she was a professional, but she was more than a professional. When she walked onto that set, I think one of the first scenes we shot,
I think we're letting her go,
was when I tell her that her mom's not going to make it. And she dives underwater. She cries underwater. And I'd never seen anything like it in my life. And I said to her then, I go, look, I don't know what's going to happen with this film, but don't worry about your career. It's funny, over the life of our lives now, you know, we write each other, and I really do consider her like my eldest daughter, you know. She is someone I dearly love.
I was on my way to swim in the Black Point pool with Brandy, and suddenly I see Mom and some douchebag walking into a house. His house, I guess.
Just some guy, it could be anybody.
Alexander Payne, I think, is a brilliant, brilliant director, and his understanding of what I needed to be, and it was, you know, fascinating, because my persona is to push against being the guy that gets a pie in the face. I always figure I'd like to do any part, but I don't want to be the guy that gets somebody throws a pie in your face and then everybody laughs at you. And the only way that the film works is if for the first 2/3 of the film, I'm the guy that gets the pie in his face. And you have to let it happen. You just have to. There's no other options. And so it was not a comfortable acting job for me in that way, because, you know, everything is like everybody who comes in the room is smarter than me, and everybody's got their act together better than I do. So it was a trickier one, but I also knew that I was in such good hands. Alexander hadn't had a movie not be successful, you know, not be critically successful. And the script was terrific. I knew my part was great by the end. I knew the scene where he says goodbye to his wife was his sort of moment of strength and his moment, you know, and I knew that the story had a circle to it, and that circle would be eventually joined, and I knew that the family being back together was going to work. Again, another sort of tableau shot with everybody just sitting there, you know, watching television together. But I felt like in the hands of Alexander, I wasn't worried about it at all.
Midnight Sky.
I knew that ultimately it was a story about redemption, and it was a story about, it was a much smaller story.
I have to warn them about the conditions on Earth.
You know, I wanted it to be like a silent movie in some of it. I wanted it to be a meditation in a way of loss. We weren't in the middle of a pandemic when it happened, but there were still all these other elements, you know, these elements of how much hate and anger we're sort of all of us experiencing at this moment in our history, all over the world. You know, go to Bolsonaro in Brazil or Orban in Hungary, or look around. Lots of anger and hate. And that, if you played it out, this takes place in 2049, if you played it out, you know, 30 years, this could very well be what our reality is, if that kind of hate is allowed to fester. I knew that the idea was that we were taking these big canvases and we're telling very small stories. Small stories I can tell, I know how to do. The big canvases, I needed help, you know, and that was with this incredible cinematographer, Martin Roux, and with these great effects guys, and they really helped us. And then, you know, it's easy when you go out in Iceland on 70-mile-an-hour wind and 40 degrees below zero. It doesn't take a whole lot of acting to be cold, you know, or be in pain.
You want to be an explorer.
Cut to my voice!
But while you're doing all that, your own life is just slipping away.
That's why I have to contact them.
ILM came in with these huge LED backdrops that we used that had cameras facing our camera, so that the backdrops just for the winter stuff outside when we're in the snow, so that when the camera moved, the camera shooting the camera would know and would change the backdrop to the angle of where we were moving to. Really amazing stuff. And it was a technical nightmare, as you can imagine. But, you know, we finished ahead of schedule and under budget. We did everything we were supposed to do. You know, it's about the idea of, first and foremost, what man could do to man if we don't pay attention, what we are capable of doing. But it's also about the spirit of who we really are. You know, if you boil us down, and that there's this need for redemption and this need to be good and kind and fair and all of those things, that as the film comes to its climax, there's all of these judgments that are made, the two guys who decide to go home. There's a judgment made there. I owe it to my wife, or I want to take this girl home. You know, there are these things that are, you know, life and death decisions, but they show such great human character that I just love the script because of that. I love the idea of this story. Also, you know, we watched it a couple days ago. You know, unfortunately for a lot of people, they don't get to see it on a giant screen. We shot it on 65. So we watched it a couple days ago in Westwood at the Village on this big screen. And, you know, it's just stunning, the shots that they put together. Even the spaceship stuff out in space, the spacewalk, when you see it, you know, in 65, it's really something.
So in Gravity, you worked with director Alfonso Cuarón. Did you take what you learned with him and apply it to this one?
The thing about Gravity, Alfonso is this genius. We were doing scenes in Gravity that they hadn't yet invented the technology for. I had like the wildest experiences of, like, they'd put a VR, you know, headset on, and then I'd hold another, you know, a camera in my hand, and in the VR I'd be walking on the spaceship that doesn't exist. It's all in VR inside this empty gymnasium, and there'd be a big monitor behind there with the DP watching it, and I would walk through all the crevices on the outside of for the spacewalk. And I'd look up there and you could see the antenna there. I go, okay, this is the angle, this is the shot for here. And they'd mark it down, and then I'd walk around. So I was able to actually shoot as if I was on this giant thing that we'd built, when we were only going to build pieces of it, and the rest was going to be CGI. An amazing experience and a great lesson. My goal in my career was to always say, look, I would say it constantly, and luckily my agents were kind about that, which is I just said, look, my job is, you know, I don't want to worry about, I don't want to just be able at the end of my career to say how many films opened to #1. You know, I don't care about the opening weekend. I wanted them to be films that would hold up longer than an opening weekend. And I've been lucky enough to have a few, and you know that makes me feel I feel very lucky.